Welcome back to Cyberspace. I'm your host, Leslie Poston, and today we're continuing our exploration into the complexities of digital interactions, building on ideas we discussed in a previous episode about online commenters. In this episode, we're diving deep into the psychological mechanisms that drive the spread of misinformation. From global politics to social media dynamics, we explore how misinformation shapes public opinion and what can be done to counteract its spread. Before we dive in, let's consider some recent events that highlight the critical importance of understanding misinformation. First, the COVID-19 pandemic. Throughout 2020 and beyond, we've been witnessing a surge of misinformation about the virus, its origins, and potential treatments. Studies have found that COVID-19 related rumors, stigma, and conspiracy theories resulted in thousands of deaths and hospitalizations worldwide. Second, the 2020 U.S. presidential election. False claims of widespread voter fraud circulated widely, culminating in the January 6th insurrection. A survey by the Public Religion Research Institute found that nearly one-third of Americans believed the election was, quote, stolen from Donald Trump despite no evidence to support this claim. Lastly, our example of climate change denial. Despite overwhelming scientific consensus, misinformation about climate change continues to circulate. A 2019 study in Nature Climate Change found that exposure to climate change misinformation on YouTube significantly decreased viewers' belief in global warming and reduced their support for mitigation policies. These examples underscore the real-world consequences of misinformation and the urgent need to understand its psychological underpinnings. This episode promises to offer valuable insights into a phenomenon that affects all of us in the digital age. Let's talk a bit about the unconscious lure of misinformation. Misinformation isn't just a random occurrence. It's often propelled by innate cognitive biases hardwired into our brains. To understand why we fall for and spread misinformation, we need to explore these cognitive biases in depth. First, we have confirmation bias. This is our tendency to search for, interpret, and recall information that confirms our pre-existing beliefs. A groundbreaking study by Lord Rawson Lepper in 1979 demonstrated this bias in action. They presented participants with identical evidence about the effectiveness of capital punishment, but found that people's pre-existing views were strengthened regardless of which position the evidence supported. In the digital age, confirmation bias can lead us to share articles that align with our views without fact-checking, perpetuating misinformation. A 2016 study by Quattrocchiotti et al., published in SSRN, found that Facebook users tend to promote information that corroborates their preferred narrative and ignores contradictory information. Next, we have the availability heuristic. This bias leads us to overestimate the likelihood of events with greater, quote, availability in memory. Psychologists Amos Tversky and Daniel Kahneman first described this bias as early as 1973. They found that people tend to judge the frequency of an event by how easily they can recall relevant instances. In the context of misinformation, sensational or emotionally charged false stories often come to mind more easily, making them seem more plausible. For example, a 2018 study by Vasuji et al., published in Science, found that false news spreads more rapidly on Twitter, now X, than true news, likely due to its novel and emotional nature, making it more available in users' minds. Then we have cognitive dissonance. This psychological discomfort occurs when we hold contradictory beliefs or when new information conflicts with existing beliefs. Leon Festinger's seminal work in the 50s laid the groundwork for understanding this phenomenon that we build on to this day. To reduce this discomfort, people might reject new factual information that challenges their beliefs, instead clinging to misinformation that aligns with their existing worldview. A 2020 study by Nyan et al. In Political Behavior found that corrective information about politicized issues often fails to change people's minds and can even backfire, strengthening their original misconceptions. The role of emotion in spreading misinformation cannot be overstated. Neuroscientific research has shown that emotionally arousing information is more likely to be remembered and shared. A 2013 study by Stieglitz and Dan Juan, published in the Journal of Management Information Systems, found that emotionally charged Twitter, now X, messages tend to be retweeted more often and more quickly compared to neutral ones. This emotional contagion can accelerate the spread of misinformation across social networks. Additionally, research from the field of affective neuroscience, pioneered by neuroscientist Jacques Panksepp, has shown that emotional arousal activates the amygdala, a key structure in memory formation. This activation can lead to stronger, more vivid memories, even if those memories are based on false information. Speaking of memory, our memory plays a vital role in how we process and perpetuate misinformation. The work of cognitive psychologist Elizabeth Loftus has been instrumental in understanding how false memories can be formed and how easily our recollections can be influenced. In a series of experiments begun in the 70s, Loft demonstrated that the way questions are asked can alter people's memories of events. In one famous study, participants who were asked how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other estimated higher speeds than those asked how fast were the cars going when they hit each other. This demonstrates how subtle language differences can shape our memories and, by extension, our understanding of events. More recently, a 2019 study by Murphy et al., published in Psychological Science, found that even when people recognize information as false, they might still use it to make decisions later if it supports their existing beliefs. This highlights how misinformation can persist in memory and influence our behavior even after being debunked. These findings have significant implications for eyewitness testimony and for how we evaluate news sources. They underscore the importance of critical thinking and the need to cross-reference information from multiple reliable sources. And what do we know about the intentional spread of misinformation? While cognitive biases can lead to the unintentional spread of misinformation, there are also those who deliberately create and disseminate false information. Understanding the psychology behind intentional deception is essential for combating misinformation. Research in personality psychology has identified certain traits associated with a higher likelihood of engaging in deceptive behavior. One such trait is Machiavellianism, named after the Italian Renaissance diplomat Niccolò Machiavelli. A 2020 study by Meslick et al., published in the Leadership Quarterly, found that individuals scoring high in Machiavellianism were more likely to engage in deceptive tactics in negotiation scenarios. These individuals tend to be more strategic in their thinking and more willing to manipulate others for personal gain. Another relevant concept is the dark triad of personality traits, which includes Machiavellianism, narcissism, and psychopathy. A 2017 meta-analysis by Muris et al., published in Perspectives on Psychological Science, found that these traits were associated with various forms of antisocial behavior, including lying and manipulation. Understanding these personality profiles can help us identify potential sources of intentional misinformation and develop strategies to counteract their influence. The deliberate spread of misinformation often employs sophisticated propaganda techniques. Many of these techniques have roots in the work of Edward Bernays, who is often referred to as a father of public relations. One is the bandwagon effect. This technique exploits our desire to conform to majority opinion. A 2020 study by Zhu et al., published in Tsinghua Science and Technology, found that knowledge of others' choices significantly influences an individual's own decisions, even when those choices are clearly incorrect. Another technique is the appeal to fear. This technique uses fear to motivate people to accept a proposition or take a certain action. A classic example is the Daisy political ad from the 1964 U.S. presidential election, which played on fears of nuclear war. However, we see smaller examples of this every day in marketing that overuses the fear button to get people to make choices, to buy certain software, or take certain actions with their money. There's also card stacking. This involves selectively presenting facts to give a distorted picture of reality. A 2019 study by Pennycook and Rand, published in Cognition, found that even minimal exposure to misinformation can lead people to perceive it as more accurate over time. Let's take a look at two notable cases of intentional misinformation spread. The Pizzagate conspiracy theory in 2016 was a false theory circulated claiming that a Washington, D.C. pizzeria was the center of a child trafficking ring linked to Hillary Clinton. This led to real-world consequences when a man fired a rifle inside the restaurant, believing he was saving trapped children. A study by Smallpage et al., published in Research and Politics in 2017, found that the belief in this conspiracy theory was associated with higher levels of partisan-motivated reasoning. Another is the miracle mineral solution, or the MMS scam. Promoters claimed this industrial bleach solution would cure various ailments, including COVID-19. The FDA has been forced to issue multiple warnings about its dangers, yet it continues to be promoted in certain circles. A 2020 study by Mian and Khan, published in BMC Medicine, found that belief in COVID-19 related misinformation, including miracle cures like MMS, was associated with lower compliance with public health measures. These cases illustrate how misinformation can lead to tangible harm and underscore the importance of critical thinking and fact-checking. The spread of misinformation isn't just about individual psychology. It's deeply intertwined with our social nature and the structures of our communities, both online and offline. Several social psychological theories can help explain how misinformation spreads within groups. Proposed by Elizabeth Noel Newman in the 70s, the spiral of silence theory suggests that people are less likely to express opinions they believe to be in the minority, fearing social isolation. A 2024 study by Hampton et al., published by the Pew Research Center, found that social media platforms might actually encourage this spiral, with people less willing to discuss controversial topics online than in person. Developed by Henri Tachevelle and John Turner in the 70s, the social identity theory posited that people derive a sense of identity and self-esteem from their group membership. A 2018 study by Von Bovel and Pereira, published in Trends in Cognitive Sciences, found that strong social identities can lead people to believe misinformation that aligns with their group's views, even in the face of clear contrary evidence. Echo chambers, environments where people encounter only beliefs or opinions that coincide with their own, can significantly amplify misinformation. A 2016 study by Del Vicario et al., published in Scientific Reports, used data from Facebook to show how echo chambers form around shared narratives, reinforcing beliefs regardless of their accuracy. They found that polarization and misinformation feed off of each other, creating a vicious cycle. Another study by Bale et al., published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, found that exposing people to opposing views on social media can actually increase political polarization. This counterintuitive finding suggests that simply bursting filter bubbles may not be enough to combat misinformation. Network theory provides valuable insights into how information and misinformation spreads through social networks. A study by Centola, published in Rationality and Society, demonstrated that while simple contagions, like viruses or simple information, spread most efficiently through weak ties in a network, complex contagions, like behaviors or beliefs, require multiple exposures and spread more effectively through strong ties and clustered networks. This has important implications for misinformation. A 2018 study by Tornberg, published in PLOS ONE, used network modeling to show how the structure of social media networks, combined with cognitive biases, can lead to the rapid spread of misinformation, especially within echo chambers. Understanding these network dynamics is necessary for developing effective strategies to combat misinformation spread. What does the research have to say about changing behaviors through psychological interventions? Well, now that we've explored the psychological mechanisms behind misinformation spread, why don't we look at how we can use this knowledge to develop effective countermeasures? One of the most promising approaches to combating misinformation is through education, particularly in critical thinking and media literacy. In a 2018 meta-analysis by Porat et al. Published in Computers in Education, they examined the effectiveness of various media literacy interventions. They found that programs that focused on developing critical thinking skills rather than just providing factual knowledge were most effective in improving students' ability to identify misinformation. One standout program is the Stanford History Education Group's Civic Online Reasoning curriculum. A study by McGrew et al., published in American Educator in 2017, found that students who completed this curriculum showed significant improvements in their ability to evaluate online sources. Insights from behavioral economics and cognitive psychology can be applied to nudge people towards more critical engagement with information. Inoculation theory is an approach pioneered by William McGuire in the 60s. It involves exposing people to weakened forms of misinformation along with refutations. A 2017 study by van der Linden et al., published in Global Challenges, found that this technique could help build resistance to climate change misinformation. The illusion of explanatory depth is a cognitive bias that leads people to believe they understand complex topics better than they actually do. A 2013 study by Fernbach et al., published in Psychological Science, found that asking people to explain in detail how a policy would work often led to more moderate political positions and greater openness to alternative viewpoints. Nudging is a concept popularized by Richard Thaler and Cass Sunstein. It involves subtly guiding people toward better decisions without restricting their choices. A 2020 study by Pennycook et al., published in Psychological Science, found that simply promoting people to think about accuracy before sharing news on social media significantly reduced the sharing of misinformation. Building resilient communities is important in the fight against misinformation. Here are some successful community-based initiatives. Finland's national strategy is a standout. Finland has implemented a comprehensive, society-wide approach to combating misinformation. A 2017 report by Wardle and Darkashan for the Council of Europe highlighted how this strategy, which includes media literacy education from primary school onwards, has made Finland highly resistant to misinformation campaigns. Another standout is Taiwan's digital democracy. Taiwan has developed innovative approaches to combating misinformation, including a COFAX collaborative fact-checking platform. A 2023 study by Zhao and Naman, published in the Journal of Online Trust and Safety, found that such collaborative approaches can be highly effective in rapidly debunking health-related misinformation. Lastly, First Draft's Crosscheck. This collaborative journalism project brings together newsrooms and technology companies to identify and debunk misinformation. That same 2017 report by Wardle and Darkashan found the approach not only effectively countered misinformation, but also improved public trust in journalism. These examples show how community-based approaches can leverage social dynamics to create environments resistant to misinformation. As we've seen, combating misinformation requires a multifaceted approach. In this final segment, I'll explore how technology and community-based solutions can work together to create a more resilient information ecosystem. Artificial intelligence is playing an increasingly important role in detecting and combating misinformation. Advanced natural language processing, or NLP, models can analyze text to identify potential misinformation. A 2020 study by Xu and Li, published as an ArXiv reprint, demonstrated an NLP model that could detect fake news with over 90% accuracy. Network analysis by AI algorithms can analyze how information spreads through social networks to identify potential misinformation campaigns. A 2018 study by Xiao et al., published in Nature Communications, utilized this approach to detect social bots spreading misinformation on what was then called Twitter. Multimodal analysis is another method. As misinformation increasingly involves manipulated images and videos, AI tools are being developed to detect these deep fakes. A 2018 study by Guerra and Delp, published in the IEE International Conference on Advanced Video and Signal-Based Surveillance, presents a deep learning approach for detecting manipulated videos with high accuracy. However, it's important to note the limitations of these technologies. A 2014 study by Gleason et al., published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, highlighted concerns about bias in AI systems and the potential for adversarial attacks that could manipulate these systems. Fact-checking. Fact-checking has become a necessary tool in the fight against misinformation. Let's explore some of the most effective approaches. Independent fact-checking organizations like Snopes, factcheck.org, or PolitiFact have become go-to sources for debunking misinformation. A study by Amazin, published in the Journal of Political Marketing, found that exposure to fact checks can significantly reduce belief in misinformation, even among those predisposed to believe it. Social media partnerships between major platforms like Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, and fact checkers can flag potentially misleading content. A 2020 study by Pennycook et al., published in Psychological Science, found that adding warning labels to false news headlines significantly reduced the perceived accuracy of these stories. Automated fact-checking is another method. AI-powered tools are being developed to scale up fact-checking efforts. Full Fact, a UK-based charity, has developed automated fact-checking tools that can check simple statistical claims in real time. Their 2019 report showed promising results in identifying and countering repeated false claims. Fact-checking faces challenges as well. A 2020 study by Nyan et al., published in Political Behavior, found that the effectiveness of fact checks can be limited by partisan-motivated reasoning, with people more likely to accept fact checks that align with their political views. The way corrections are presented can also significantly impact their effectiveness. The continued influence effect is a phenomenon where people continue to rely on misinformation even after it has been corrected. It was demonstrated in a classic 1994 study by Johnson and Seifert, published in the Journal of Experimental Psychology, Learning, Memory, and Cognition. There's also the backfire effect. In some cases, corrections can actually strengthen belief in the original misinformation. However, recent research has questioned the prevalence of this effect. A 2018 meta-analysis by Walter and Murphy, published in Communication Monographs, found that corrections are generally effective and true backfire effects are now rare. The illusory truth effect. Repeated exposure to a statement, even if it's explicitly labeled as false, can increase its perceived truthfulness over time. This effect was first demonstrated by Hasher et al. In 1977 and has been replicated in numerous studies since. Understanding these psychological effects is vital for designing effective correction strategies. For instance, a 2017 study by Chan et al., published in Psychological Science, found that providing a causal alternative explanation when debunking a myth was more effective than a simple retraction. Building resilient communities by creating environments where accurate information can thrive is perhaps the most sustainable long-term solution to misinformation. Media literacy programs. Finland's comprehensive media literacy education, which starts in elementary school, has been credited with making its citizens highly resistant to misinformation. A 2017 report by Wardle and Durkishin highlighted this as a model for other countries. Community fact-checking. Taiwan's digital democracy approach includes platforms like vTaiwan and the previously mentioned Kofax. which allows citizens to collaboratively identify and debunk misinformation. A 2023 study by Zhao and Naman, published in the Journal of Online Trust and Safety, found that this approach not only counters misinformation, but also builds social capital and trust. Fostering trust in institutions. Research has shown that trust in institutions is a key factor in resilience against misinformation. A 2014 study by Gleason et al., published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, used network modeling to show how institutional trust can help prevent the spread of misinformation during crisis events. Promoting diverse information ecosystems. Exposure to diverse viewpoints can help combat the echo chamber effect. However, it's important to do this thoughtfully. A 2018 study by Bale et al., published in Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, found that exposure to opposing views on social media can actually increase polarization, highlighting a need for carefully designed intervention. As we've explored throughout this episode, the spread of misinformation is a complex phenomenon rooted in our cognitive biases, social dynamics, and the structure of our information ecosystems. Combating it requires a multifaceted approach that combines the understanding of cognitive biases and the psychology of misinformation, educational interventions to improve critical thinking and media literacy, technological solutions for detection and fact-checking, and a community-based approach to build resilience and foster trust. By addressing information at these multiple levels, we can create a more informed and resilient society. As individuals, we start by cultivating a habit of critical thinking, seeking out diverse sources of information, and being mindful of our own biases. For business leaders and employees, understanding these dynamics is necessary in today's information-rich work environments. It can help make better decisions and foster a culture of truth-seeking, building more resilient organizations. Remember, the fight against misinformation is not just about debunking individual false claims. It's about creating an environment where truth can thrive and where we can harness the power of information to make better decisions and build stronger communities. As we wrap up, I'd like to present to you a quote from Carl Sagan, the renowned scientist and communicator, who said, "It pays to keep an open mind, but not so open that your brains fall out." In our quest for knowledge, let's strive for that balance of openness and critical thinking. Thank you for joining me on this journey through the psychology of misinformation. A bit of housekeeping. Don't forget, you can vote for us for Best Psychology Podcast at the link in our show notes. Voting is open until October 1st. We also started a Patreon, and this week we got our first patron. Come over to patreon.com/cyberspace for a place to chat with me about episodes directly and to share your ideas. There will always be a free membership tier. I'm your host, Leslie Poston. Join me next time on Cyberspace for more insights into the complexities of human behavior in the digital age. Until then, stay curious.